this is a full skeleton. If I said, let's say that this would be the top and this is the bottom of somebody's skeletal structure, and I would normally look for a halfway, and the halfway is what we call the great trochanter. It's actually the hip socket, or the leg, the top of the femur, which is the leg that goes into the hip, and that on a lot of people is exactly halfway. And so I'll talk about how we can look for that, but that's what I'll usually do is go top, bottom, halfway. I'll do another half again, and then another half again, and that splits everything into like 8. We're a little bit short here because, to be honest, most people are 7.5. People with really long legs are 8. I would love to be an 8. I'm probably a 7. I probably have 3 below and 4 above. I have really short legs, so that there's a lot of variety. But if you want to just get a normal drawing, if you split it in half, that's good, because nobody will complain about having too long a leg. It always makes people look better. So if you're ever doing figure drawings, there's nothing that will be lost if you give somebody a little bit longer leg or a little bit longer neck. They like those things. So anyway, that's so. But you've heard, I know you've heard that we're talking about 8 heads high. So this is like the skull, and then we have the clavicle, and we have the spine, of course, that goes through everything. But the clavicle actually ties into the sternum, which is the bone in front that protects your heart and all of that important area right there. So the clavicle is right here, and what that is if you're looking at somebody's musculature, there's a little opening right there at the base of your neck. There's a little hole or a depression, and what we have is, let me see, I'm going to put it on another side. If we're looking at the head from the side, a lot of times if I'm kind of seeing for a symbol for the face and head, I'll give myself kind of a curve with a jawline, and then almost put a circle behind it, because that way I'll get enough width here. I don't usually use too many symbols for things, but if I'm really trying to get a real quick little gesture drawing, a quick gesture drawing is something that just tells you where the action is, and you do it in about 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds at most. This is a really good shorthand for the face. Okay, so what we have is the eye being about halfway in a grown-up, halfway between the chin and the back of the head, not the front of the head, the back of the head. You know that when you stand up at the doctor's office, they measure your height back here, not here. And so we really have quite a bit more skull, which is, if you look at the skull picture, which is, you can see that the eye socket is here, and the cheekbone is here, and you can see that this is like an angle like this, and then the forehead is like this, and then the face is kind of a curve usually. So anyway, that's now where the ear comes in. The ear is actually always going to be at the end of this mandible. Your lower jaw is called the mandible, and the mandible is going to end at the bottom of the ear, and the bottom of the ear can be up high above your eyebrow, or it can be low below your lips. I mean, the ear can be anywhere on a head. So that's kind of interesting. You always have these books that say this is where the nose is, this is where the mouth is, this is where the ear is. Don't pay any attention to that. You got to do your own measuring, because all of this stuff is based on bone structure, which is unique to everybody. But if you don't get the bone structure right, you won't get a likeness ever. So here we have the ear, and then if you kind of touch the back of your ear, you'll realize that there's a little space before the hair even starts, and then there's a straight part of the back of your head, and so there's really some space between the back of the ear and the back of the head as well. But at that same place that the mandible ties in to the ear, there's also another muscle that comes forward, and it's called the Sternocleidomastoid Muscle, and it's doing this. It's a muscle that comes from the base of the ear and ties in right there at that depression that begins the clavicle, which is the collarbone. And so if you kind of know this little bit of anatomy, it's like it will really help to make things understandable. And then the other thing that happens at the end of the clavicle, there's a little tip at the top of your shoulder, and I'll show you the back, because the back is going to actually do this and do this, but because that's a muscle in the back. But what we have is the clavicle goes from this depression up to the top of your shoulder. You put your bathing suit strap on the, just right next to that little bump on your top of your shoulder. And then the next thing that you should know about is that, so then this actually ties in to the top of the humerus, big joint, shoulder joint, which also ties into the the scapula, which is in back, which is your shoulder blade. And then of course, all of the ribs tie into this sternum as well. And at the end of the ribs, we have the diaphragm. But if you're a thin person, you can always feel where the diaphragm or the ribs stop, because there's going to be a little depression at the top part of your tummy. And then we have a little where the waist is. The ribs are here. We're going to go to the shoulder again. Oh, and so as long as we're doing the bone for the shoulder, let's talk about this big joint here, and the humerus, the top bone of the arm, goes into your elbow, which involves a huge joint, because then there's the radius and the ulna that have to tie into that. So you have not just one bone there, we have two bones going into that elbow joint, and that elbow joint is usually going to be right about waist high. If you look at people, observe them, it's really a good thing to do. Notice that most people, the bend of their elbow is right about at their waist. Now, it can vary, because if you have a really long torso, some people actually have an extra spine, a vertebrae, and so they have a lot longer upper torso. They actually might have a lot shorter arm. Their hands don't even reach the end of their rear end. But most people, their hands are going to end up being about mid-thigh. So by the time you get to the wrist and the hand, that will usually be long enough to be mid-thigh. So here we have the spine coming into the pelvis, and I don't pay too much attention. I can't see too much of the pelvis, except that the widest part of the pelvis, both for men and for women, is this right here, this great trochanter, the joint of where the leg hits the hip. And so that's the halfway mark, and it seems like even if you carry a lot of weight, you can still feel that's going to be right at the edge of the body. Very rarely is there a lot of flesh on top of that joint, so you can kind of feel it on yourself at the top of your leg. You can feel the joint. And and probably about 15 years old is when the proportion of that halfway that I'm telling you about, halfway to the leg and halfway at the great trochanter, because before that, kids have a lot shorter leg and a lot bigger body. It kind of starts with, I'll tell you a little bit more about it and I'll draw it later, but babies are just basically brain, mouth, and guts. There's very little leg, and there's very little arms, and there's very little neck. I mean, it's just guts and brains. That's a big head, big belly, not much else. So that's it takes a long time to grow up. So here's the pelvis, and so we can kind of mark that down as something that we can see. And then, but it's really interesting that this comes in. See how the femur comes in, and that's part of what has happened so that we can walk and jog and jump. That gives us a lot of spring. There's a lot of it's really remarkable how the skeleton supports the way we walk upright, because most animals don't, as you know. And so then we have a big knee joint with the patella, which is a flat bone on the front of the knee. I'm sure you've heard of what the patella is. And then we come down with the tibia and the fibula, and then one of them ends, I'm not even sure which one it is, I should, but I don't. The inside ankle is higher than the outside ankle. So you can kind of say the inside bone starts high, the outside ankle starts low. This is going to be really helpful for you to notice this, that the ankle on the outside is lower than the ankle on the inside. Angle like that. Isn't that interesting? You don't notice these things, but that's kind of important. And then you can think of the foot as coming straight, almost straight down the inside, and then it's actually got some thickness, because if you look at it straight on, there's the thickness of the toes, and it kind of wedges out here to the outside. So mostly the way you would put a foot is like a wedge going outward with toes in this area. So that's what the foot might look like from the front. Okay, so now if I put this same skeleton sideways, so I'm gonna do the thing that I do, the kind of the jawline and the circle, and then I'm gonna say, okay, interestingly enough, the neck comes almost straight down the back, but from the side, your neck goes this way, not straight up and down. From the front, of course, it goes straight up and down. But from the side, somebody's neck is on an angle of about 30 degrees. It could depend, but so that from the chin, it goes in, whatever that negative shape is, and then it comes back out for the sternum and the chest. And here's the shoulder, and this is all the trapezius, which is the muscle that goes in here, fills this in from the back. So anyway, so we have the shoulder, but what my point here is that we have kind of a curve this way, and then we have another curve this way, and a slightly offset curve for the belly, and then we have another curve this way, and then a slightly off for the back of the leg, and then we have a curve this way and a slightly, so it's like a series of, it's really interesting. It's like curve, 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 and again, this is all in the service of being able to have the ability to have a powerful movement up and down. Because if we didn't have all of this kind of bounce or buoyancy, we would just be stiff like a stick. I think this is really interesting to kind of notice that you have opposing curves, big curve, big curve, big curve, big curve, but every one of them is opposed just a little bit lower by a smaller curve. Isn't that interesting? Okay. And so if you just kind of notice that, and then the hands are going to be ending about there, just like with the leg being the same length, the halfway mark being the great trochanter at 15, so is it that the face development is the same, because a baby is actually starts out to be, like I said, all brains, and so where a person, you can go from the chin to the top of the back of the head and say this is where the eyes are going to be, right in here. about an eye apart. However wide the eye is, there's usually an eye width between the two eyes. Again, that's a general rule. It can be different. Never just assume that all these things are written in stone. They're not. Okay, and so then we have the eye socket, and if I was going to light it from this direction, I would be interested in saying, okay, all of this, and then under the nose, under the top lip, under the bottom lip. So all of this is in shadow. So if you can see that if I depend on shadow instead of drawing out noses and like this, which is what we learned somewhere, and eyes that are like this, which is what we learned somewhere. If we do it with just shadow shapes, it's so quick. And then we have this coming like that. Okay, so that's an adult, but a baby is literally, like I said, mostly brains, and so the eye on a baby is clear down about a third. This mandible, this jaw doesn't develop. The important part is the brain, so the mandible grows later, and so that's why babies are always, it's like a lower third, 2/3. And so if you do any child, I'm going to look at the drawing that I gave you of the little blonde girl, and I'm going to say, okay, here's eye socket, bottom of the nose, shape of the top opening of the mouth. And so now I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to measure from, this is all on the dark side, so let me put that in. I'm going to measure how the hair would be all dark. From here to here, I'm going to measure on my picture, and then I'm going to say, where does that come? So if I go from here, it comes to about here, and that means that I have to end my hair clear up here, because that's how much, so this is double, and that is that much more. So all of this is going to be down, and we're talking about the ear, the inside of the ear, and the hair shape gives me the back of the head shape, and then we have this negative shape, and we have this negative shape coming in, and I have to really, look at what's my, this is a shadow shape, then there's an opening right there, and then of course this is all dark behind the, what's behind her face. In fact, this is really dark. So anyway, that's kind of the idea is, if you, before you start anything, give yourself that measurement. Measure from the bottom of the chin to the middle of the eye. That's the middle of the eye. From there to the top of the head, and see, and then also kind of give yourself that axis angle. What's the front of the, how far is this close to this? Because if you put that axis angle really close to the edge of the face, you won't ever turn that face towards you, because that's what we usually do, because we see ourselves in the mirror every day, and so we tend to want to change a 3/4 view to a full face-on view, because it's just how your brain wants to see it. So that happens an awful lot. So that's how that would develop, and that's how that would be measured. So this one is one of the drawings that I want you to work on, but I'm going to also give you another assignment as well. So I'm not sure that the rest of this gives you any thoughts. It's just that that the babies, not only is the nose is going to always point up on a baby because they need to nurse, and so the nose, this right here, that bone that at the top of your nose, that isn't there either. It's cartilage. So the bone, the nose sticks up, and so you can always see the nostrils in a baby, because this bone on the side, it's like, instead of being like this from the side, with a lip here. This bone isn't here. So a baby comes with a big forehead, and then the nose kind of goes like this. And then they all have these huge cheeks, again, so that they can nurse, because they need to eat, and that's the most important thing. And they have pretty, and then they have no chin at all, just no chin. So you have this big forehead and little tiny mandible, hardly any chin at all, and just kind of just know about those things. So we have nice full lips so we can nurse, nice big cheeks so we can, and that's why babies are hard to do, is because they all have these same features. They're not going to have a bunch of individual wrinkles or unique life marks that will separate them from everyone else. All babies have these same identical features, and that's why they tend to look alike, and they're harder to draw, because if you get one angle just a smidge wrong, it's not going to be that baby anymore. So that's you've heard that babies are hard, but a lot of times you'll see cartoons that will actually try to do children with adult heads and just big eyes, and they look ridiculous, because that's not just the difference between a baby and a grown-up. It's not just big eyes. So you'll start noticing where people get it wrong. Okay, so it's 9:43. So I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. I have that one, the little girl, or I also sent a picture of my friend Howard. And there. So you've got the guy that looks very happy and smiling, the big guy. Okay. I want two things on that, and you can do it with the little girl with the white dress and or Howard. I want one of them to be changed into so we have two things to do for next week. I want one of them to be changed into that. I'm going to go onto my screen again. Let me share the screen so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, share it. And let's see, get rid of that. So what I want is, there, that's what I want right here. Okay, I want you to break the drawing down into this angular, every plane. So here's the side of the nose, here's the top of the nose, so there's no curved lines. It's almost as if you were making this out of pieces of metal that you cut that you can't curve. Can you see that okay? Can you understand what I'm trying to get at? So we're taking, and you have this for reference, but you're taking any, I did this in high school, by the way. This is a very old drawing. But this would be a flat plane. This is another flat plane, a flat plane. Everything is just broken into a series of flat planes. Okay, and I don't think this will take you a whole long time. I think that you can probably get this done in about a half an hour. But I just want you to understand, if you can break each part of the face into a flat plane, it's going to help you see how things curve around, and how why there's shadow here, is because there's a flat plane here that overhangs this. But I don't want you to shadow it. I just want you to do it all as line. Okay? Got it? Okay. The next thing I want you to do with either Howard, probably this one should be Howard, is I want you to take a soft charcoal. I've asked you to get hard charcoal, but most of the time in any batch of hard charcoal, there's some charcoal that's softer. And so if you put this on a flat table and just fill this in with just black charcoal, just fill the whole thing in. If you put it horizontally, then it won't just drip down. But if you do it vertically, put a little bit of tin foil down here to catch everything, because soft charcoal will kind of drop down. Okay, so that's the idea. And then I want you to take an eraser. The little girl is the one that will work the best because she's lighter, and I just want you to erase her out. So instead of drawing her, you're going to erase her. So we're going to take a little bit of, this would be the forehead, and then you can add charcoal and subtract charcoal. You can kind of adjust this. But if you start learning how to see a shape of light and how it kind of comes down here, and then it's a little bit not quite as light right there, and so I want you to be able to see what you're seeing from a dark field. And so that way, instead of drawing the eyes so much, you're going to draw just the biggest shapes first. You have to get yourself placed. If this comes down to a sharp point right here, just underneath the hair, and then this temple comes up a little bit further to the right, goes up a little higher, and then all of this, and I keep having to move my eraser around so I can get to a fresh spot. All of this, there's nothing in this area that isn't pretty light, and then there's a little bit here and a little bit here, and then we're going to come down the side of the nose and through here a little bit more, and then we're going to come down through here the top lip, and it looks pretty yucky now, doesn't it? And as it develops, it's going to be really kind of interesting how you can, okay, here's the jawline, the angle of the jaw, bottom of the jaw, the angle of the mandible that goes up, and that's where that hits the ear, which comes back to that little bit further back, which also ties into that part of the neck. So that's the deal. I want you to do a really probably the whole thing should be, the whole drawing should be about 10 inches, maybe 12 inches by the time I get up here, because her hair again goes clear up there. And I'll be actually, in some of this, I'll be having to lighten up what's behind her so that I can see an edge that's dark on the left side. And so it just can be developed just like any drawing. It just takes a little bit longer because we're trying to see all of the nuance and we're trying to come it out from shapes. And this is to, again, help identify that you're trying to see a shape of light, not a nose or a mouth or something else. So this is, and then they have a little cheek right here. And then I said that I might need to, if I go too far, I might have to put some of it back. So this part, yeah, that's okay. I didn't, and this is going to come clear out here. Okay, so that's the idea. This is going to come down like this and like this, and pretty soon it'll be a face. And I'll try to go ahead and finish this so that I can show you what it looks like as it develops. And it, but this, I think, is going to be a really important way to see shapes. This light shape here goes right down into the light shape of the dress. There's nothing in this area that isn't really light, so that all comes out. And that's how we do it. And then this part here will be light, which will give us the edge of her head. Like that, okay? You think you understand what I'm looking at? Howard is the big guy. All right, then I will see you next week. Send me stuff as you do it, and I will talk to you next week, and we'll go from there, okay? Bye-bye.